Something came from Baltimore. Something came from Baltimore.
Something Came from Baltimore is a jazz, blues, and R&B podcast, and it's not really about Baltimore. I'm your host, Tom Gauker, and today, via Zoom, we travel to Norway to get a taste of the avant-garde and the improvisational work of the group called Friends and Neighbors. The album that we are chatting about is The Earth is Sharp. The album was released October 15, 2021 on the Clear Feed Records. And you'll be grateful that I was able to bring this album to your attention. It's a hot recording. Today's full interview is available on Patreon. It's in a tier level, so you can support our efforts. And we thank you for flipping the episodes to 5 friends who love music just like you do. It's jazz, and it's important that you share it with your neighbors and keep this genre alive. I think you'll be impressed with a Norwegian band called Friends and Neighbors. Before we start the interview, let's start off the show with a sample of Salad Days. Tolaf Esfang, welcome to Something Came from Baltimore.
Thank you.
We are excited about the album. It was released in October 15, 2021. It's on the Clean Feed.
Clean Feeds, Portuguese label based in Lisbon. It can be read in many different ways, but it can be read as number, but it can also be read as sharp, like in a musical notation. It's either, sharp, like in a half tone up, in contradiction to flat, which is one half note down of the note you write. So it's sort of a word game. So the earth is sharp. Contradiction to the opposite, that would be earth is flat. But yeah.
Earth is sharp. You have that over there too,
yeah.
huh?
I guess that exists all over the world, but maybe not so much here. I'm not sure.
The album cover that you have, how cold was it that day? Everyone has a hat on and everyone has their hands in their pockets.
No, it was a cold day in Brooklyn.
Yeah, we have that too. I went into your Wikipedia for your weather and I was like, oh, the Northern Lights are really cool there. And your temperature is a lot colder than maybe say Baltimore, but not that much.
No, and also it's a different kind of cold. I think the wind and the humidity is much worse on a cold day in New York or in Baltimore than it is, at least where I live, which is in the mountains. So it's much more dry in the air, so the cold doesn't feel that bad. And when it's blowing and you are near the ocean, that's the worst kind of cold.
In your bio, you guys have listed here that I thought was pretty interesting about the type of music that you have, because I think that a lot of people are going to, in the Baltimore area and the fans of the podcast are going to listen to you guys. And the music they love in the 60s and the 70s, free jazz sounds, the ones invented by the likes of Ornette Coleman, Pharoah Sanders, and John Carter. Energetic and melodic free jazz, to be more specific, with simple and suggestive tunes that you can sing as pop or folk songs, but with complex, multi-layered, improvised developments that go to the extremes of rage and joy. Whoever wrote that was a pretty good narrative of what the sound is.
I can agree. I agree.
When I saw the likes of like Pharoah Sanders and Ornette Coleman of the 60s, where free jazz was new and kind of crazy, your free jazz seems to be in the mix of a lot of melodic sounds. So it's there, but it's not the full end all being. Am I right by saying that?
Yeah, I mean, we grew up in a different time and a different part of the world, and I guess it makes sense that it sounds different too. I mean, it has to do with a lot of things. It has to do with recording equipment, facilities, but also just cultural circumstances. We are influenced by the music that we grew up with or were surrounded by. All the five of us in the band, we studied together, and of course, is heavily influenced by the American jazz tradition as a whole, but more specifically, maybe the areas that you mentioned and the artists that you mentioned. But our music, we all sort of enjoy and worship the flexibility that those values in music gives us. That there are no fixed roles in a way. We make things up as they go along, even though we have compositions. The concerts are widely different than the last concert. Everything happens, and the music makes its own path in a way. And that's, at least for me, that's what I find most intriguing about this music that many people refer to as free jazz, that it gives us a certain individual freedom and collective freedom to form music as we go along. So we're not preset in the way of performing. And even though we did not grow up in the same sort of sense culturally as where this tradition was created, so it's it's many paradoxes that you ask yourself studying jazz, falling in love with this tradition, American jazz tradition, that we can't relate to in many ways, but we just have to let ourselves get inspired and do our take on it. And I think it's still valid today as a musical expression. Very much. It's relevant and represents the time that we live in. The world has become so small when it comes to where to search for inspiration.
I hope you're enjoying our interview with friends and neighbors. Support the podcast, Flip the Five People. Check out Patreon. It's in the show notes, along with Something Came from Baltimore, the show. It's a 30-minute version of this podcast. Now let's get back to the interview. Are you guys have other jobs? Are you working, or do you have students that you work with, or is there other artists that you guys work with, or is this the main gig? I know that question came out really weird, but I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know what you mean. That's always, it's a continuous struggle in a way. I mean, everybody try to play as much as we can. Mm-hmm. And I think in the genre of jazz and beyond, it's quite common to have several projects. It's not like while in other forms of music, rock, pop, it's more common to maybe have one main project that everything goes into. I think it's, at least in our scene here in Scandinavia, it's more common and also necessary to have a bunch of projects to be able to have enough concerts.
Yeah.
And also, even in addition to that, most people, or at least more common than not common, is to have maybe a teaching job or a different kind of job. But I think the most people I play with and work with try to play as much as possible and then fill in with other kinds of work. Some of us in this group teach at the conservatory in Trondheim and other places, and have private students or work in different kinds of schools. But also, sometimes I do other jobs too. Yeah. It's a complex income picture. But there is some challenging by doing this kind of music and make it a living. It's realistic but hard.
Yeah, in this day and age, you have to keep your net, casted very wide. You can't dare cast yourself, or you're going to miss out on opportunities. So I totally understand that.
I think that's a strength within the Norwegian jazz and improvised music scene, that there is a tradition of going in your own direction parallel to learning the tradition. That's at least the school sort of pedagogic aesthetical direction in Trondheim, where most of the students have studied. It's a quite old jazz department, started in late 70s, and it's been sort of setting the premises for a very original way to teach music, very ear-based, like it's a lot of ear training. A good teacher at the conservatory doesn't tell you aesthetically what's right and wrong, but they teach you to ask the right questions, and so that when you're finished the studies, you are able to make sense and ask yourself the right questions to bring you to the next next direction or next level. Because if you get taught or get told all through many years, through the whole studies, what to do and what not to do, you don't sort of learn a critical sense of where you want to go yourself.
That's right.
So I think it's a very important tool that you actually start to reflect in an early age.
We got way off the subject, but I'm going to get you right back to this album. The album is called The Earth is Sharp.
Yeah.
Perfect. Release date was October 15, 2021. It's on the Clean Feed Records. I am going to say your name one more time, which is Tola Espan.
Yeah, that's close enough. Yeah.
God. The album is fantastic. It's going to be one of my favorites for the year. I'm really excited to share it with our listeners. The first song I want to talk. Yeah, thank you. No, and thanks for offering to talk to me about it. I find that actually each play I get deeper and deeper into the thought, like the waves of the music, and I enjoy it so much more. I play it on the way to work, which is like a 45-minute drive, and it's just perfect to do the whole album. So it kind of really works. It works. So the first song we want to talk about is Halifax.
Halifax, yeah.
Which is either a province of Nova Scotia, or it is a banking company, or it's none of the above.
I'm leaning towards the first one.
Beautiful
the place, the geographic. Yeah, I've never been there, but I always wanted to go there. So it's sort of a tribute to a place that I have never been.
Did you tell everyone, let's pay tribute to Halifax?
I don't think that the fact that it's called Halifax influenced the other members in the group very much in what they do in that way. But this was sort of a composition that played itself a little bit. We didn't talk too much. We had I remember we had like a instrumental debate in the beginning, whether it should be flute or saxophone or trumpet or muted trumpet or whatever, the instrumentation. But it sort of played out itself. I played this composition with a couple of, me and the bass player in the group played this composition live sometimes with two Chicago improvisers, Ben Lamar Gay and Nick Mazzarella. So we tried it in a different setting, but I think having a harmonic instrument with the piano sort of cracked the composition in a better direction. But it's sort of a little bit different than what we usually do. Maybe more regular jazz composition way of structuring the whole thing. It's a theme, solo, new solo, different harmonic level, and then back to the melody again. So it's kind of ordinary in that sense.
The tail end of this album is Joseph, which is the same thing. It starts off in a really melodic way, and then it kind of builds and sweeps through the rest of the song. That to me is my favorite song on the album. Very unexpected turns in a quiet way. Where I think you were going to go, you guys went elsewhere.
Yeah, I think Joseph is a very good finishing song too. The tour we just did, we did a 8-concert tour in Norway and Austria 2 weeks ago, and very often Joseph was the final tune. It just makes sense to put it in the end, and also that's also a composition that we didn't talk too much about. It just played out in a way. Mm-hmm. Not that means that it's better or a worse composition, but some compositions we don't have to talk about anything.
I like it. What are you talking about?
We just So
I like this song.
Yeah, but I mean, some compositions demands that we have not a discussion, but like, yeah, we can do this, or we can go in that direction, or maybe we should switch around the solos, or maybe we should have a groove, and then go into open form. But this tune sort of said itself.
That's great. That, you know, it's interesting when you do free jazz. It's to look back at to what level does it, you know, become.
Also, Joseph is also a tribute or a homage to Joe McPhee, the saxophone player I played in Baltimore with. His full name is Jonathan Joseph McPhee.
Wow, what a turnaround, huh? You're interviewing with a guy from Baltimore.
Yeah.
And you were at Baltimore. That's a weird connection. The next song I'm going to talk about is Untitled. And I want to play a segment of that towards the middle. And it looks like there's, I don't know, like either marching or like crinkling a paper or some kind of background, like, you know, a noise that's not attached to your instruments.
How far out is it? Like on the Untitled track?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it starts with I have to recap how it starts, but it starts with the piano, and then it's the melody, and then it's a piano trio, right?
Yes.
And then it goes to sort of a saxophone solo accompanied by the rest of us come in and interact or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. But there just seems like there was some incidental like sounds going on also.
Yeah, there are a lot of extended techniques on all instruments, both piano and, I mean, saxophone in terms of multiphonics, and trumpets in terms of mutes and other sound effects. But it's all acoustic sound effects. It's no digital sound effects.
Good.
And of course, drums and bass also is a lot of extended techniques in terms of percussion, things I put on the drums. The bass plays alternative techniques all the time without a bow. So it's probably something like that you're hearing. I think extended techniques is sort of a established part of our vocabulary in a way. And it's sort of also been a natural sort of part of the vocabulary in the so-called free jazz tradition and European improvised music tradition for that matter. I think it's a normal way to end up playing when you are constantly seeking out, breaking boundaries. So it's not that I don't find the drums interesting enough. It's just what I hear in my head demands that I also explore the sounds that I make.
I got one more for you, and it's the Earthish chart. We're going to play a segment of that also. If you're able to just fill us in a little. That's, to me, is the most aggressively free jazz piece out of the bunch.
I can't. Are you playing them in the background or?
Oh, no? I'm going to segment in, like, you know.
Okay.
we're gonna listen to it. Yeah. Like, once you talk about it, we'll play a segment. We'll go right to the next song. So
I figured. Yeah.
It's unfortunate because, you know, I do segments that like are 30 to 40 seconds long, and it's not really enough time for your songs develop and go in different directions. So what I choose, you're like, it doesn't really give a full picture of those songs, I guess I'm saying.
it is a more sort of aggressive, up-tempo, typical free jazz kind of composition, but it's also quite sort of strict in many ways. It has odd measures. It has rhythmical, not complexities, but details. But also, it's hard of. I remember we spent some time on. We want to make it flexible too, so it's like it's not a. So it doesn't feel like it's too strict playing in a way. But the first part is quite up tempo, and then it goes into a trumpet solo, quite open trumpet solo that ends in a up tempo swing kind of vibe, and then it completely changed tempo to different time signature. That's one thing, but it changes metrics in a way. It's not something that you count in. It's just that from 1 second to another we switch beat. So it's also quite typical in our compositions that you have one kind of groove in one solo and a completely different groove in another solo. So I would say this is a quite composed piece, but there are some solid, obvious references when I listen to this music now. It's also like the last part there is with the percussion and the way that we play the groove is it's quite clear sort of tributes to some Keith Jarrett recordings from the late 60s.
Tola, that's fine. Thank you very much for joining me today on Something Came from Baltimore. You did it.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the interview today with the avant-garde improvisational group from Norway called Friends and Neighbors. The album is called The World is Sharp. Support the artist and spin that album. I think you'll be impressed. In the show notes, we have information about the band, Patreon, how to subscribe to the podcast, how to get access to Something Came from Baltimore, the show, on thebox.com. And we always ask you to flip this episode to 5 people who love music just as much as you do, because we want you all to be a part of that Be More Music scene.
Something came from Baltimore. 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 Something came from Baltimore.